And I want to express my sincere gratitude to all the inspiring panelists and speakers and performers and volunteers who put so much work into this event. This virtual march was made successful by those who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, and I really mean tirelessly. I cannot conceive of a better and more dedicated team of people than those who worked with me this year, and I'm very grateful to them. I'm proud to know you and call you colleagues as well as friends. I also want to thank those who attended and those who helped publicize this event and stuck around till the so-called bitter end, including our partners in other cities and regions and those marching with us overseas. Without all of you, we would just be a couple of friends on a Zoom call. And by the way, I'm going to ad-lib here for a half a second and let everybody know what goes on behind the scenes. There's so much communication going on between the various production people who are all volunteers. We've got not only the Zoom chat going, we've got texts going back and forth. We have the people running the Facebook Live. This is a very, very active. It's almost like, it's like being in a TV studio, honestly. So I want to thank all of them. And we will, by the way, have a full video of this entire virtual March event. We will have it up probably in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be edited very soon. So please stay tuned for that if any of you missed part of it and you want to maybe see part of it again. So I'd like to share that I'm really inspired and enthusiastic about events like these. I believe that what we're doing here is changing hearts and minds, building bridges, and building peace from the bottom up in the communities themselves where it really can do some good. My friend Rabbi Zach Shapiro, and by the way, it's a shame I don't think that Ron Galperin is on the call anymore. That's his husband. I was hoping maybe I could just share a little hello to the family. But my friend Rabbi Zach Shapiro once commented that nobody ever won an argument over Facebook. I'm sure that somebody once did, but his humorous observation still holds true. We tend to become entrenched in our viewpoints, and we don't listen to one another. And while social media has opened up myriad ways for people to communicate and interact with others across the world, it also tends to promote tribalism and polarization. One of the things we have tried to do by bringing together diverse voices in these interfaith marches is to encourage peaceful change and reconciliation through respectful sharing and consideration of ideas. My wife Melissa and I were talking last night about a realization that people on the other end of the political spectrum are equally passionate and caring about the state of the world. Many people are so passionate about making changes, as passionate and caring as are we, and they are convinced that they are right, just as we are convinced that we're right. But we have different sources for our opinions, and possibly neither of us have the complete picture. I have seen a decline in civility and respect for human dignity in the last few years. Many of us have seen that. Perhaps people observed this in earlier times as well, in earlier ages, past centuries, but these are our times, and it's disturbing to us. If we are to come to better and more equitable outcomes, reduce the divisiveness in the world today, we're going to have to listen to other people that disagree with us, and to see the common humanity in them, even people that we don't like. My friend, Pastor Brad Bailey, the pastor of Westside Vineyard Church, who spoke at last year's march, said, "Tolerance is how we treat those who disagree with us." I have often heard the overused platitude, and I don't mean to disparage anyone says this because it's valid, but sometimes a bit overused, that tolerance is not enough. That we need more than tolerance in order to save our world. And I think the push for collaboration and cooperation and universal love and everything beyond tolerance is great. It's important. But we won't get there until we have universal tolerance. No one ever died from an abundance of tolerance, or even sufficient tolerance. People are harmed when their human rights are not acknowledged or respected, when there is an absence of tolerance. Anything beyond that is advanced material. That's the advanced course. The dessert after dinner. Or to quote Pink Floyd, "How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat?" You don't have to agree with someone, but you do have to respect their human rights. And when anyone's rights are denied, the rights of others will be denied in retaliation. It is a self-perpetuating cycle that escalates. I've often noticed that the interfaith community tends to skew to the left, and that's fine as a progressive movement. In the past few years, I've observed an increase in partners from the more conservative religious communities, and their full inclusion in this movement is going to be crucial to the success of our movement. Lately, I've been interviewing people for my next book, provisionally called Interfaith America, hopefully to be done in the next year. And it's about the interfaith movement and where it's going and what we still need to do, sort of a manifesto for the interfaith movement. I found it striking how many hardcore interfaith or multi-faith, as sometimes the term they use, workers there are in the evangelical communities, but we rarely hear about them. Perhaps they are overshadowed in the news by their less tolerant co-religionists, but sometimes it's our own unwelcoming attitude that makes them shy away from interfaith events where we could meet and work with them. It is crucial that we recognize the work of conservative partners like Pastor Rick Warren, Bob Roberts, and Elijah Brown, who I had the opportunity to interview a few weeks ago, the executive director of the Baptist World Alliance, and to embrace their communities, even if some of us don't like their theology or aspects of their moral stance. As a community, as a nation, we're going to have to learn that it is okay to disagree with people, but we have to respect their lived experience, have civil discussions, and not thrive on divisive rhetoric and interactions as if we were professional pugilists eager for our next fight. If humanity is going to survive and thrive through pandemics, global warming, civil unrest, and violent reactions to our cultural and societal differences, we are going to have to see and respect the common shared humanity in each other and refrain from demonizing each other. Yes, there are people that do bad things, but each of us has a kernel of humanity that if we believe in human rights, we must respect that kernel of humanity. Now, we have some problems in our country, which echo the problems around the world at large in other countries. We're not unique in that. And some of these have to do with our methods of policing and the use of force. I don't know how to solve the problems that we face regarding the nexus between our country's historic endemic racism, police brutality, and the militarization of our police forces. I don't have the answers, but I do know how it will not be solved. By polarization and reducing our conversation partners to enemies and denying their shared humanity. Is it possible for me to support law enforcement, and I do, and still call for stricter policies, updated training, and more accountability of individuals who dishonor their badges? Yes. Just the same as I can support the military, and I do, and yet call for the accountability of those who would torture and murder civilians in war zones, the Robert Baleses and William Calleys of the world, and to challenge the policies that allow and even encourage wartime atrocities. Any individual that dishonors their vows brings disgrace to and endangers the whole organization. We can and must do better. Now, 2 weeks ago, I was profoundly disturbed to hear of the fatal shooting of Dijon Kizi by LA Sheriff's deputies, a black man who, although he had dropped a firearm while fleeing, was by that point unarmed. We can and must do better. I was also disturbed by reports that there are actually gangs that exist within the LA Sheriff's Department, some of which are racially motivated and operate with impunity outside the law. We can and must do better. I am profoundly disturbed every time I see examples of police brutality and overreach, both in the US and abroad. We can and must do better. I was also disturbed last year when the LA Sheriff ended the program where deputies support and interact with interfaith events like ours, effectively putting an end to the presence of some of our longtime and most recognizable friends. Some of you know who I'm talking about. We can and must do better. But I was equally disturbed this morning to learn that someone had shot 2 sheriff's deputies last night, unprovoked. There was no self-defense involved. One of which victims was in fact a young mother of a small child. The sheriff's deputy was a young mother. And that outside of the hospital where these 2 deputies were being treated for their injuries, reportedly in critical condition, there were protesters blocking the entrance, shouting, "We hope they die." This is not okay. We can and must do better. Many of us have worked with sheriff's deputies in our interfaith movement, those who have been with us in previous years' marches. These are friends of ours. I cannot imagine anyone wishing harm on those friends. And similarly, I want to thank Chief Moore and our friends in law enforcement who are here with us today, who took the time to be here, to remind us of their continued commitment to progress and equitable justice. May God bless you and keep you and guide you in your charge to protect and serve. When we descend into lawlessness, it is often the most vulnerable and completely innocent who suffer, not the villains whom the mobs hoped would be held accountable by vigilante justice. Look at Robespierre's reign of terror following the French Revolution, during which many of those who merely worked for someone in power were sent to their deaths under Madame la Guillotine. Or the Russian Revolution, in which not only the aristocracy suffered, but so did the peasants who were co-opted into a movement that shifted the wealth and power to a new set of bullies and strongmen, the Communist Party. Or the Cambodian Khmer Rouge, that some of you may remember in the early 1970s, that not only overthrew the Sihanouk regime, but descended into a racist and classist genocide that brutally murdered upwards of 2 million people, mostly those who were identifiable as being educated. Time and time again, we see a descent into lawlessness, harming the most valuable, the most vulnerable, coupled with a blatant disregard for human rights. Can we protest violence without protesting people, or perpetrating and propagating our own violence? Yes. I know that we all want change now. Whatever it is that we want changed, we want it now. We're impatient. But our species has been alive for 2 million years in some form, and it has taken time to get to where we are now. No longer living in caves, fighting each other over access to a herd of game animals. But we have to defend against another descent into tribalism, retreating back into our ideological caves. We are going to have to focus on the long game and to see each other as fellow travelers, fellow organisms within a larger entity. We are going to have to continue to be patient and to work towards a common goal with love and compassion. Now, the I Ching, the ancient Chinese Confucian text, counsels against swift and violent attempts at change, which are rarely lasting. Only gradual and well-reasoned change is permanent. Hexagram 53 of the I Ching says, "No influence such as that exerted by agitators has a lasting effect." The Tao Te Ching, a Taoist text, section number 30, also speaks ill of violence as a method of change. Powerful men are well advised not to use violence, for violence has a habit of returning. Thorns and weeds grow wherever an army goes, and lean years follow a great war. For even the strongest force will weaken with time, and then its violence will return and kill it. Now, I don't want our human propensity towards violence to kill us. I want us to survive and thrive for another 2 million years, if possible. Earlier, I mentioned the book that I'm writing about the interfaith community. Those of us here in this gathering are writing it together. So how do we want it to end? Where do we want it to go? Our work now is what will help our species and our planet to survive that long.